Bitcoin. You've heard of it, right? And it seems like nobody's just okay with it. People either love it or they hate it. To some, it's this incredible financial miracle, the actual future of money. But to others, it's just a menace, a dangerous tool for criminals and high-stakes gamblers.
So, what's the real story here? Is this the biggest revolution since the internet? Or is it just a whole lot of hype? The headlines just make it more confusing, don't they? The narratives are always clashing. So, okay, let's dive in and try to figure this out. On one side, you've got this amazing promise, a secure global money system that nobody controls. But then, on the other side, you hear all the scary stuff, the crazy price swings, the risk, the crime. And that right there, that's the paradox at the very heart of the whole Bitcoin debate.
So in this explainer, we're going to cut right through all that noise. We're taking on the 3 biggest myths you always hear about Bitcoin, and we're going to put them up against the actual data to see what's really going on.
All right, first up, let's tackle the big one, the most common criticism you hear all the time. Bitcoin is just a bubble, a classic case of speculative mania that's just waiting to pop and go straight to zero. But what if that's just the wrong way to look at it? I mean, when you really dig into the data, that whole bubble label doesn't quite seem to fit Bitcoin's unique and, let's be honest, kind of weird price history.
See, instead of just one big bubble, we've seen this pattern that just keeps repeating. Bitcoin's price goes wild, it hits a new milestone, everyone yells bubble, then it crashes hard. But, and this is the key part, it then stabilizes at a level way higher than where it started. And then the whole cycle just kicks off all over again.
Now, what's so fascinating is how different this is from all those famous bubbles in history. You know, Tulip Mania, the South Sea bubble, even the housing crisis. They popped, and that was it. They never, ever recovered to their old highs. But Bitcoin? It just keeps coming back, setting a new, higher floor every single time it crashes.
So this kind of suggests maybe we're not looking at a bubble at all. What if this is just what it looks like when a totally new, disruptive technology gets adopted? It doesn't happen smoothly. It happens in these crazy waves, and each wave just pulls more people in and sets a new, higher base for its value.
And you can actually see that trend right here. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still way more volatile than something like stocks, but the data shows that over the last 10 years, Bitcoin's volatility has actually been trending down. So as the market gets bigger and more mature, it seems like those waves are getting a little less choppy.
Okay, so that leads us right into myth number 2. This is another one you hear constantly. Bitcoin has no intrinsic value. It's not backed by anything, it's just pixels on a screen. All right, let's really unpack that.
So first off, what does intrinsic value even mean? Well, basically, it's the value something has just because of what it is, its core features and properties. It's kind of like its true worth, not just what the market is paying for it on any given day.
So for something like a stock, that value comes from things you can measure, like future profits or dividends. Bitcoin's value? It's completely different. It comes from a brand new set of digital properties. The fact that there's a limited supply, that the network is super secure all over the world, and that its history of transactions can never be changed.
Okay, but a skeptic will jump in and say, that's all fine and good, but it doesn't actually produce anything. It doesn't pay you a dividend. But what if it kind of does?
So here's the thing. Because Bitcoin's code is totally open, anyone can copy it and make a new version. This is called a hard fork. And when that happens, people who own the original Bitcoin often just get the new coins for free. And look at this. If you had just held one Bitcoin through all the major forks and reinvested those new coins, you could have gotten a return of over 21%. That sounds a lot like a stream of value, doesn't it?
All right, let's move on to the really dark myth, the one that ties Bitcoin to criminals. We've all heard the stories, right? That Bitcoin is just secret, untraceable money for hackers and all sorts of shady stuff on the dark web.
The thing is, this whole myth is built on one big misunderstanding. Bitcoin isn't anonymous, it's pseudonymous. And here's the difference. Anonymous means no one has a clue who you are. Pseudonymous is like using a screen name online. Everything you do is public and tied to that screen name, and with a little work, someone can figure out who you really are.
Okay, now take a look at this number. $40.9 billion. That looks like a ton of money tied to crypto crime, doesn't it? I mean, that's a headline-grabbing figure for sure.
But here's the kicker. That number, that's the amount of illegal money that was successfully traced by analytics companies. The fact that this number even exists proves the point. Bitcoin isn't anonymous. The blockchain is a public record for everyone to see, which actually makes it a pretty terrible choice if you're a criminal trying to hide your tracks.
And you know what's really interesting? It seems like the criminals are finally starting to figure this out. The data shows that Bitcoin isn't even their favorite anymore. Now it's stablecoins, basically digital dollars, that make up almost 2/3 of all the shady transaction volume. Way more than Bitcoin.
And we really need to put this all into perspective. Look at this. In 2024, all of that illicit activity was just a tiny sliver, 0.14% of all crypto transactions. So look, any crime is bad, of course, but we're talking about a microscopic fraction of a system that's mostly being used for perfectly legitimate stuff.
So, where does all this leave us? We've taken on some pretty big myths, but that doesn't mean Bitcoin is perfect or that all its problems are solved. Not by a long shot. This story is definitely not over yet.
So let's do a quick recap. The whole bubble thing, it looks a lot more like waves of adoption. No intrinsic value? Well, its value is just different. It's based on scarcity and security. And anonymous money for criminals? Nope. It's actually traceable, which makes it pretty risky for them.
But we have to be realistic. There are still some very real concerns we need to keep an eye on. What if someone finds a major bug in Bitcoin's code? That's a small risk, but it's there. What if bad regulations kill adoption? And hey, there's always the chance people just lose interest. Or some other threat we haven't even thought of yet pops up.
And that really brings us to the big final question. Is Bitcoin this revolutionary, world-changing technology that just has some growing pains? Or are these problems going to be what brings it down in the end? The honest answer is, nobody knows. That part of the story is still being written.